although the routing and remote access service is started by the routing and remote access server setup wizard, we have a couple of things we need to do before connecting VPN clients to the network. So first thing that we need to do is we need to configure the DHCP relay agent on the VPN server. So let me jump back into my VPN server. So I'm going to open up Server Manager. I'll click Tools and I'll click on Routing and Remote Access. Under my VPN server, I'll expand IPv4. I'll right click on General and I'll say New Routing Protocol. So you can see that we have DHCP relay agent listed as one of the routing protocols. So I'm going to select that and I'll click on OK. So a new node, the DHCP relay agent node, appears on the left side of the routing and remote access console. So I'm going to right click on it and I'll go into properties, and in the DHCP relay agent box you need to type the IP address of your DHCP server. So that will be 192.168.10.2. I'll click add, I'll click apply, and I'll click OK. Now you need to right click on the DHCP relay agent again and click on new interface, and you need to select the internal interface. Now this is an internal interface used by routing and remote access service. This is not an internal local network interface used by your VPN server. So my local network interface is LAN. We shouldn't select this, but we need to select the internal interface, which is exclusively used by the routing and remote access service. So that will be internal, and I'll click OK on this. So you want to be saying relay DHCP packets. So we leave the hop count and boot thresholds to the defaults, and I'll click OK. Alright, now the DHCP server and DHCP relay agent are now ready to use, and VPN clients can now receive the DHCP scope options if you have configured them. So before our VPN clients connect to the corporate network, we need to create a network policy server policy to allow our VPN clients to connect to corporate network. So we're going to create a network policy server policy to allow VPN clients to connect to our corporate network. So I'm going to jump back into my VPN server, and back in routing and remote access, I'll right click on remote access logging and policies, and I'll say launch NPS. It will take us straight to network policy server MMC snap-in. I'll click on network policies, and by default you can see a policy is created which will deny access to Microsoft routing and remote access server, and it is enabled by default. So the policy name is connections to Microsoft routing and remote access server, and the status is enabled, and the access type is deny access. So what we need to do is we need to create a new policy which will allow our VPN clients to connect to the remote access server. To do that, you need to right click on network policies and click new, and for the policy name you'll type allow VPN clients to connect to remote access server. Now for the type of network access server, we'll select remote access server VPN dial-up. I'll click next. Now you need to specify a condition, so I'll click on add. You have different types of conditions. You have active directory groups such as Windows groups, machine groups, and user groups. You have HCAP groups such as location groups and HCAP user groups. You have a condition that specify day and time restrictions, which specifies the days and time when connection attempts are not allowed. You can also specify condition based on IPv4 and IPv6 address. You can also specify the authentication type, allowed EAP types, frame protocol, service type, and tunnel type. You can also specify the radius client properties as one of the conditions, and you have some other conditions which are very specific to network access server. So in my case, I'll select user groups because I already have a VPN user group called VPN users. So let me go back into my VPN server. I'll click add and I'll click add groups and I'll say VPN users. I'll click check name and I'll click on OK. I'll click OK again and I'll click next. In the specify access permission screen, you have two options, access granted and access denied. Access granted option will grant access if your VPN client connection matches the condition of this policy you have specified in the previous screen. And access denied will deny the access if your VPN client connection matches the condition of this policy you have specified in the previous screen. So I'm going to select access granted. That is what we want to do. You have another checkbox that says access is determined by user dial-in properties. So let me go back into my domain controller. Let me show you a user property. And if I go into dial-in tab, for network access permission, I have three options, and they are allow access, deny access, control access through NPS network policy. So you can either set allow access or deny access, or you can control access through NPS network policy. So on my VPN server, if I have this option checked, which says access is determined by user dial-in properties, which overrides NPS policy. So basically what it does is it will either grant or deny access according to the selections you have made for user dial-in properties. So if I say allow access, it will allow this user to dial into the VPN server. If I say deny access, it will not allow the user to dial into the VPN server even though I have selected access granted for the NPS policy. If you select control access through NPS network policy, so it will allow the user group that I've selected in the previous screen to connect to the VPN server if I have selected access granted. If I've selected access denied, it will not allow the user group that I've selected in the previous screen to connect to this VPN server. So in my case, I want to have access granted, and I'll have this option checked which says access is determined by user dial-in properties. Now, this is very useful in case if you want to disable VPN access for one particular user in a user group which is allowed to connect to the corporate network via VPN. Let's say I have 10 users from user 01 to user 10, and they all are added in the VPN users group. So if I want to disable or if I want to block VPN access to one particular user, let's say user 1, I'll go into dial in and I'll click deny access. So what it does, user 01 will not have access to dial into the VPN, whereas all the other users in that group will have access to dial into the VPN. So I only have one user. I'll select allow access for this user. I'll click apply. Let me jump back into my VPN server. So I'll click next on this. For the authentication methods, I will leave the default selections, but in a production environment, you need to make sure that you are using a highly secured authentication method. So I'm going to click next. Now in this screen, you can configure things such as idle timeout, session timeout, and day and time restrictions. So for idle timeout, you can specify the maximum time in minutes that the server can retain an idle VPN connection before it disconnects the connection. In my case, I'll say 120 minutes, which is 2 hours. And for the session timeout, you can specify the maximum time that the VPN user can be connected. In my case, I will say 1440 minutes, which is 1 day. I will leave the default selections for the other options and I'll click next. Again, I'll leave the default selections for radius attributes and routing and remote access attributes such as IP filters. So I'm going to click next. All right, we have successfully created a network policy, and I'll click on finish. So you can see that the network policy has been created, and basically this will allow the users in the user group VPN users to connect to this VPN server. So one thing that I want to discuss before I start connecting my home user to the VPN server is VPN Tunneling Protocols. So in Windows Server 2012 R2, it supports 4 different VPN tunneling protocols. The first one is point-to-point tunneling protocol, which is Pptp. The second one is L2TP, which is layer 2 tunneling protocol. And the third one is secure socket tunneling protocol, which is SSTP. And the fourth one is IKE version 2, which is Internet Key Exchange version 2. So PPTP, point-to-point tunneling protocol, uses TCP port 1723 and GRE 47. It has a very low security, but it is widely available across all platforms. L2TP, layer 2 tunneling protocol, uses port 500, 4500, 1701 and ESP50. It has a very high security, but it needs IPsec and Internet Key Exchange version 1. It is difficult to configure, but it is best suited for site-to-site VPN. It is supported by Windows 2000, Windows XP, Windows 2003, Windows Vista, and Windows 2008, and later editions of Windows operating systems. SSTP, Secure Socket Tunneling Protocol. It uses TCP port 443, which is SSL port. It has a very high security. It is easily used from almost any location. It has a very high overhead because of the SSL encryption that it has to do, but it is supported on Windows Vista SP1 and later editions, and it is also supported on Windows Server 2008. But it can be used only for client VPN connection only, so you cannot use it for site-to-site VPN. And it is also not cross-platform. The next one is IKE v2, which is Internet Key Exchange version 2. It uses UDP port 500, 4500, 1701 and ESP50. It has a very high security. It supports VPN Reconnect, NAT, Transversal. It is also supported by Windows Server 2008 R2, Windows 7, Windows Server 2012, Windows Server 2012 R2, and Windows 8 and Windows 8.1. So after routing and remote access has been enabled and configured, so by default, each tunneling protocol will have 128 ports available. You would want to remove the extra ports and protocols as well that are created by default. If you are not using any one of these protocols, it is better to remove them as a security best practice or keep the port value as 0. Let's say if you have 10 VPN users who use L2TP protocol to connect to corporate network, then you need to modify the number of L2TP ports to use only 10 from 128 ports. And if you're not going to use other VPN tunneling protocols, then you can change the value for the number of ports from 128 to 0. Also, you can configure these protocols not to be used by any connection. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm back in my VPN server and back in routing and remote access snap-in. I'll click on ports, and you can see it has created 128 ports for each of these protocols. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on ports and I'll click on properties. So in my case, I'm only going to use Pptp for demonstration purpose, though it has a low security. So in your production environment, it is not recommended that you use Pptp. since it's a lab environment, it is okay to use Pptp. So what I'll do is I'll click on Pptp and I'll click on configure. For the maximum ports, I will change this value from 128 to 10 because I only have 10 remote users who will be connecting to my remote access server. So I'm going to click on OK. Now you'll get a warning message that says it will disconnect the active connections if the new number of ports is less than the current incoming and outgoing connections. Since I don't have any connections made to this VPN server, I can click yes on it. So you can see that the value has been changed from 128 to 10. And for the other tunneling protocols which I'm not going to use, so for example, I'll click on SSTP, I'll click on configure, and I'll uncheck remote access connections inbound only. I'll click on OK, so it will say none. I can go back and I can change the maximum ports from 128 to 0. So again, I'll click yes on the warning message. I'll do the same thing for the other tunneling protocols. Click configure, remove inbound, and remove inbound and outbound, and the maximum ports will be 0. I'll click OK, I'll click yes, I'll click on L2TP, I'll click configure, I'll remove inbound, inbound and outbound. I'll change the maximum ports from 128 to 0. I'll click OK, and I'll click yes. Alright, you can see that I have disabled all the other protocols which I'm not going to use, and I have changed the number of ports for those other protocols from 128 to 0. And for Pptp, I've changed the number of ports from 128 to 10 because I only have 10 remote users connecting to this remote access server. So I'm going to click on OK. Alright, now you can see that the number of ports has been reduced to 10, and these ports are of type Pptp only. And in future, if you want to enable one of these protocols, you just go back to ports and you simply reverse the things that we just did. And if you want to add number of ports, you can do by opening the properties of one of the protocols. Alright, finally, we'll show you how you can connect a Windows client to VPN. Alright, what I have is a Windows 8.1 client, so I'm going to power this up. So it's a Windows 8.1, and like I said, I'm already connected to a public network. And one thing I want to tell you is that if you're running your setup on a VMware workstation, it is recommended that you disable or at least you stop the VMware DHCP service. If this is enabled, then your setup will not work. So I've stopped the service for temporarily to show you the demo. So it's better you set the startup type as manual and stop the service. So I'll click apply, close this one. So I'm going to open up Network and Sharing Center. I'll click on Set up a new connection or network. I need to click on Connect to a workplace. I'll click Next. So now it's saying, how do you want to connect? So I'm going to say use my internet connection, but I want to set up the internet connection later. So I'll type in my VPN server IP address, which is 63.25.117.2. If you want, you can type the public DNS name of your VPN server. Since I don't have this IP address registered in the public domain, I'll simply type the public IP address. And for the destination name, I'll simply say like Contoso VPN. I'll check remember my credentials. I'll click create. So now you can see that it has created Contoso VPN. So if I come here, change adapter settings, I can see that it has created a dialer for Contoso VPN. So I'm going to double click this and I'll click on Contoso VPN. I'll click connect. For the username, I'll type in Contoso user 01. This is the user which has been allowed to connect to the VPN, and I'll type the password and I'll click OK. Okay, it is giving an error. What you need to do is you need to go into properties. If you click security, by default it will use IKE version 2, which is Internet Key Exchange version 2. But if you remember, we enabled only Pptp protocol. So for the type of VPN, we need to select Pptp. Now again, in the production environment, this is not recommended because Pptp protocol has a low security. In the lab environment, it should be okay. So I'm going to select Pptp. And for the authentication, click on Allow these protocols. And Microsoft CHAP version 2 is one of the protocol which we have enabled in our network policy server. So let me show you. So if I open network policy server and if I click on network policies, and this is the policy that we have created. So I'm going to double click on this. I'll click on constraints, and if I select the authentication method, so Microsoft CHAP version 2 is the less secure authentication method that we have already selected. Now again, in the production environment, you need to make sure that you use a highly secure authentication method. For the demo purpose, it is okay if we select this. So let me go back to my Windows client. So I've selected Allow this protocol, Microsoft CHAP version 2, and type of VPN is point-to-point tunneling protocol, PPTP. So I'm going to click on OK. It has been changed from IKE version 2 to PPTP. I'm going to double click on this. I'll click on Contoso VPN, click Connect, and I'll type in the user who's allowed to connect to the VPN and the password. I'll click OK. Alright, now you can see that we have connected our home user to the VPN. So it is showing the status as connected, and you can see that it is connected to contoso.local domain. So if I click on status and if I click on details, I can see that it has used the internal IP of our corporate network, and this IP has been assigned from our Dhcp server. So I'll click close, and let me see if I can ping my file server. Alright, there you go. This is how you connect a home user who is running Windows operating system to your remote access or VPN server. So if I come back to VPN 01, if I go back to routing and remote access, you can see that one of the client has been connected. If you double click on this, you can see the status, you can see how much bytes it has received and sent out, and its IP address. You can disconnect or reset the session. If you click on ports, you can see one of the port is active. If you double click again, it will show the same information that we saw in the previous screen. Alright, I hope you liked this video. For more videos, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.